Good afternoon, Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Wednesday to you. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you for joining this weather community as we continue to track Ernesto, which is now a hurricane pulling away from Puerto Rico and taking aim at Bermuda and as well as Atlantic Canada. And the growing concern is still here as a lot of our model guidance brings the center of Ernesto as a stronger hurricane towards Bermuda and the opportunity for Bermuda to take perhaps even a direct hit like it did back in 2016 from Hurricane Nicole. So we are going to be tracking those possibilities. Here's a look at the tropics, and really Ernesto is the only thing in the Atlantic to be concerned with, dumping heavy rain on Puerto Rico, but moving out over very warm waters of the southwestern tropical Atlantic and likely to intensify through the day today, tonight, and probably continuing into tomorrow. Behind it, we do have a wave we'll be tracking, but is not showing any signs of organization. And then additional waves likely to come off of Africa that we need to keep an eye on here in the coming days. So right now, Ernesto, really the only thing of concern. You can see our other wave here behind it is pretty low in latitude and fighting a little bit of dry air to its north and east, and at this point, not expected to develop. Here's a look now at Ernesto, now a hurricane. You can see there is some dry air limiting the western side of the storm, but things are wrapping up very well on the eastern side, and Puerto Rico has been dealing with extremely heavy rain, as have the islands to the east, including the Virgin Islands. We can start to see kind of a shrimp-shaped kind of swirl, if you want to call it that, showing us signs that this system is going to intensify and perhaps intensify pretty quickly here over the next 24 hours. The storm center here from Dacula shows some darker cloud tops here to the north of Puerto Rico and a lot of heavy bands of rain still to the east and south of the system. So unfortunately, if you're in Puerto Rico, in the Virgin Islands and surrounding islands, even though the storm has moved away, there's a very moist inflow coming in off the south and east, creating some gusty winds, heavy rain, and frequent power outages. Now, we've had recon flying through Ernesto here this morning, and you can see that the wind field has become a lot stronger here on the eastern side and the southeast side, but near the center, we don't have yet a very well-defined core that is producing stronger winds. So still some broadness to this system, and until it gathers more of a core here near the center, which is expected to happen, we are going to continue to see the strengthening rate being a little on the slow side. So I'll be honest with you guys, I thought by now it probably would have developed a stronger core, but it is fighting some dry air here and probably some downsloping from the mountains of Hispaniola. But nonetheless, a storm that is still in a favorable position to strengthen, and the official forecast brings it to Category 3 intensity by Friday morning. You can see the storm will be pulling away here tonight and strengthening to a stronger Category 1 hurricane and likely a Category 2 by tomorrow afternoon and evening. And in my opinion, I could still see how this became stronger a little bit quicker, but it does need to gain more organization before it can do that. Now, the official track brings it just to the west of Bermuda on Saturday morning, but the window does include Bermuda. After that, the window, of course, gets larger, and there's a lot of uncertainty exactly in where this system could go. But we may be dealing with effects in Atlantic Canada as early as Monday morning, as there are some solutions that bring this up into Nova Scotia and maybe towards Prince Edward Island. Other solutions curving it out to sea, but clipping the Cape Breton Island, as well as much of Newfoundland, especially the southern portion of Newfoundland, which just dealt with Fiona here a couple years ago. Pretty nasty storm. Here's the radar from Puerto Rico. We have flood warnings in effect. That's all of these deeper greens here, and the heavy rain just continues to pound the island. Even though the storm avoided to the north and east last night, it did make landfall on St. Thomas, and the rain just continues and continues. A lot like what we saw with Debbie last week in portions of the southeast. Even though the storm is pulling away, it's drawing a ton of moisture in with it. So we continue to have problems with power outages, and in fact, the majority of the Virgin Islands, including all of St. Croix, are without electricity this morning. Most of St. John as well, and a good chunk of St. Thomas. I don't have a map for Puerto Rico, but if you look at the website, you'll see about half of Puerto Rico is without electricity right now. And the majority of those outages are across Caguas and Ponce. You can see only 36% of people have power in Caguas and 28% in Ponce, 24% in Carolina. Not as bad for San Juan, fortunately, but we're still dealing with some heavy rain and some gusty winds, so there are the chances we could still have power outages. Now, here's a look at how the ensembles have adjusted over time. And you can see a bit of a rightward turn here over the last couple of days towards Bermuda, but then past Bermuda, the curve back to the right is not quite as severe, meaning more opportunity for at least parts of eastern Nova Scotia and Newfoundland to be in the potential path of this cyclone. As we look at the ensembles from the GFS, you can see while the majority do curve it away from land, there are several that bring it over Newfoundland and a few that still threaten eastern Nova Scotia with time. As we get into later next week, this should accelerate and get picked up by the jet stream and impact Iceland and Ireland and Scotland with a lot of wind and rain as well. And you can see the majority of our models now not showing a direct landfall on Nova Scotia, but some are taking it across Newfoundland here later Monday into Tuesday. You can't see Bermuda because it is completely covered here by models, some just to the left, some to the right, but all pretty much within about 100, 150 miles of Bermuda, which is remarkable. It's not a very big island. I said yesterday it's only about 20, 25 miles long, about 60 or so square miles. So a very small target, but one that certainly is right in the middle of all of our guidance. Now, if you look at the model forecast, it continues to show steady intensification to Category 2 strength within less than 24 hours on a lot of our models here, some not quite as strong as that, and then perhaps even Category 3 here. I don't think we're talking Category 4. It would have to be strengthening faster than it is now because it will be losing some of the oceanic heat that is creating that favorable environment for strengthening. And you can see our relative humidity is pretty good here for a couple of days. Then we start to get some dry air in on the western side of the system. So it will have a fight to be put up against. But significant heat content continues for the next couple of days. Wind shear remains pretty low up until later in the weekend. And as a result, there's still a pretty decent ceiling, albeit not as high as maybe what it looked like this time yesterday. But still, if you look at the ship's forecast, about a 2 to 3 times the usual amount of intensification expected here, perhaps 3 times what climatology would show. And that would be obviously putting us at major hurricane intensity here by the time we get into Friday. Here's the GFS model, and you can see the storm is going to grow, which is the biggest concern. It will have dry air on the western side. This is Bermuda here, and this is Friday morning. So we can see the storm center is aiming for Bermuda, and if it does go just west, then the strongest of the wind and the rain will unfortunately put Bermuda right over that. And you can see here, this particular run of the GFS turns it away to the right, but just to the east. That's a little bit better, but obviously not good enough. But we have several other models like the European from earlier taking it directly over the island. The storm is going to continue to grow, but will weaken. It'll get some dry air on the southwestern side here by the time we get to Monday morning. And then the big question mark is, does it hit Newfoundland? And right now, the GFS keeps it just offshore, but does bring some gusty winds and very rough surf with this system. I hate to say it every time, but when we have a hurricane in the Atlantic, it could be several hundred miles off the coast of New England and the East Coast. But wave action will be high. We'll have rip currents, and it will be dangerous this weekend if you are planning kind of a late summer beach trip. So be aware of that. Rip currents are nothing to be messed with here. This is the HMON tropical model showing the eye growing in size here and approaching Bermuda as we get to Friday night into Saturday morning. This is Bermuda right here. You can see the HMON takes the storm system pretty much over the western end of the island with the strongest winds going right over the entirety of the island. This would be probably the worst case scenario. I would call it a direct hit because the eye wall would go directly over the island. And this would be starting Saturday morning and continuing into Saturday night. The storm is slowing down as well as it gets up into here. It's kind of left between two ridges of high pressure, so left in a bit of a steering weakness. It will eventually accelerate, but probably not until it leaves the area here early Sunday morning. And then after that, you can see the pressure doesn't exactly drop too quickly here, so it's not going to weaken very quickly. It will become larger in size, but eventually we'll see the winds coming down by the time we get to next week. Here's the HWRF model as well, showing Ernesto deepening very quickly. This model shows it getting into the 940s, which is a stronger Category 3 hurricane. The other models aren't quite as strong. And you can see it will be moving very close to Bermuda with the strongest winds on the northern and eastern side here Saturday morning. So models still have some details to work out here, but all of them show Bermuda being impacted and some showing a direct hit here, starting early Saturday morning and continuing until Saturday evening. and then the system pulls away and moves into cooler water. And the HWRF, by the way, is taking aim at Nova Scotia, especially the eastern portion, maybe not Halifax, but east of there. You can see Sable Island here would get in on some very nasty wind and waves action as well. Here's a look at what the HWRF satellite is showing, just to kind of give you an idea of how the size is going to grow. And you can see a growing storm system, which is common for these types of storms that move through here. This particular model has a massive eye wall. I don't know if that's quite going to happen, but you can see it continues to grow, especially on the northern side, and impacts will be felt in Nova Scotia by early Monday morning. Here's a look at the GFS model, bringing our system up just to the east of Bermuda here, and you can see it is turning away to the right. If the system goes west of Bermuda, it's more of a threat to Nova Scotia. If it goes east, then I could see how it misses. But again, we aren't going to know exactly how that's going to play out for a few more days. Here's a look at the European model, showing the hurricane going basically directly over the island of Bermuda. And then this model does not go out past 90 hours, but more than likely it's going to be a close call for Nova Scotia and maybe more of a direct hit for southeastern portions of Newfoundland. If you look at the wind forecast here, you can see on Bermuda, winds are going to ramp up very quickly here Friday evening. They'll be at their worst early in the day on Saturday and then improving by Saturday night. But a possibility here, if the eye goes over the island, that we see 12 hours plus of hurricane force wind. So the one thing I do have to say about this storm, unlike some of the other hits Bermuda's had, it's going to be slowing down rather than speeding up. And as a result, the duration of this event could be longer than what you might be used to on the island of Bermuda. Here's a look at wind forecasts, and you can see winds will start to pick up here as we get into Friday night. Friday morning, they're getting close to tropical storm force. And then Friday afternoon, we're seeing gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour. By Friday evening, hurricane force wind gusts will become possible. And then later Friday night into the day on Saturday, if the eye goes over the island, there'll be a little bit of a lull. If it doesn't, we may see hurricane force winds for quite a few hours here until about Saturday evening. As we look back at Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands here, you can see rain totals are still going to pile up here today into tonight, locally up to 6 inches of additional rain, which will cause flooding, especially on the southward facing slopes here of the mountains, as well as across Vieques and Culebra, and maybe even St. John and St. Thomas here. So lots of rain still ongoing here, and we're not done with the tropics. We may see more action coming off of Africa here later next week, but the week after is when we start getting into the peak weeks of our hurricane season. And right now, we are seeing from the global tropics hazards a 60% or greater chance of a tropical system forming in the last week of August. That trend probably continues as we head into September. I would imagine it would, since we are in a more favorable than average season here. So over the next week, we're going to have twice our typical cyclone activity in the Atlantic, much higher in the Central Pacific because we just don't see much and there may be a disturbance there, and then closer to average across the Western Pacific. Also in the Indian Ocean here, maybe a rare winter system. You can see they're up to 9.3. Now, as we head to the next week, you can see the Atlantic will not be quite as busy with respect to average. We're going to recycle, though, into the following week. The Pacific will be around average. As we head, though, to the beginning of September, we're again sliding above the average. And this is going to be one of our busiest weeks on average, the week that ends the 8th of September. And then the following week, we continue to have a significant climb in tropical activity, probably multiple storms as we get to that September 10th peak of our Atlantic hurricane season. In the Central Pacific, we may see a rare system south of Hawaii. We'll keep an eye on it, but I'm not expecting any strong development. And then in the Pacific, multiple systems to track, especially around Japan. We've got to keep an eye on things here. A weakening depression, a remnant low, moving up the east coast of Japan, and then maybe something that could form down here south of India and Sri Lanka, which would be pretty unusual. But the system we need to watch, especially near Tokyo, is this new typhoon Ampel, which is probably going to be a very strong typhoon in a couple of days. Right now, the official track is uncomfortably close to the central coast of Japan, but it has trended a bit to the right. So that's some good news. But if it gets stronger or goes to the left of this forecast track, we may have problems, especially south and east of Tokyo. Lots of Japanese folks live here, so obviously this is going to be something we need to watch pretty closely as intensity forecasts go up into the categories of 3 and 4 as the system is approaching the coast. And you can see forecast wind gusts in knots are going to reach 90 knots or more for the coastal islands. Those are about 100-mile-per-hour gusts. Near the coastline, hurricane force wind gusts possible of 75 miles per hour, 66 knots. Tokyo proper could see tropical storm force wind, and the time frame on that is going to be locally Friday afternoon and Friday night in Tokyo. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please consider subscribing and becoming a member of the community. As always, I welcome all folks here. I'm here to help out, and I do want to give all of the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. As a Christian, this is my calling to serve others, to help others prepare for storms. As a meteorologist, we all have gifts, and it's very easy to feel that we're not fulfilling whatever our calling is here on earth, but know that the Lord has created us all, and he's created us to be strong. And Paul tells the church of Ephesians 6:10 through 12, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And that is every person's battle. It's not against each other. It is that there's an enemy out there that wants to rob us of our joy and rob us of our full potential. And the Lord is here to help us fight those battles. We don't have to do it ourselves. We need to trust in the Lord, be strong in the Lord, and put on the whole armor of God and use him to fight off temptation, to fight off evil, to fight off anything that happens in our life that really we can't control. We want to blame ourselves for everything. We want to blame other people, but this is what the devil wants us to do. He wants us to fight with each other and not give him the credit for everything. But the Lord is good, and I know that he can bring us through any temptation and any struggle. And prayer helps as well. And I do want to pray for you if you do have a prayer request, if you are doing spiritual battle, because the more we tell the Lord our struggles, the more he can go to bat for us. So I hope you all have a great Wednesday, and I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Take care.